Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So if you are not following me on Twitter, you should, because I put up a poll recently saying that I meant to do a Black History Month reading video, but since it was already mid-March, should I even bother? Or, given that it probably won't come out until April. And one person said no, don't bother because no one cares, which yikes, but 6 other people said yes, do it. So if you want to contribute to the types of videos that I do on this channel or express your opinion, follow me on Twitter. Also follow me on Instagram because I post cool stuff there. Okay, so moving on to the video. I'm going to be talking mostly about books that I read in February with a couple that I read in January and March to just kind of bridge the Black History Month. I did read a little bit in January and March that I feel like really thematically goes into this video. So I'm going to start with the first book that I actually finished this year total, which is Midnight Robber by Nalo Hopkinson. I did this one on audiobook. It's read by Robin Miles. She's an absolutely fantastic audiobook narrator. This one is an Afrofuturist sci-fi story that begins on a planet that has been colonized mostly by people of Caribbean descent. But then the majority of the story takes place after the main character, when she's a young girl, and her father get exiled to a prison planet that's in another dimension, so there's no way to get back. And she ends up going along with it kind of on accident. He's the one that's actually committed a crime and is being exiled for it. This book is very, very intense. I do want to note that there are some serious trigger warnings, including on-screen sexual violence. If you want to know more about that, I would recommend hitting me up on social media because I don't want to talk about it too much in this video for spoiler reasons, but it is also just an amazing book. It's told sort of alternating between the actual narrative of the main girl, I've forgotten her name because I read this 3 months ago, and then the sort of myth that ended up being created around her, where she took on this persona of the robber queen, and in the prison planet ended up becoming almost a Robin Hood figure. I mean, not in a steals from the rich, gives to the poor kind of way, more in an avenges the downtrodden kind of a way. It's got amazing writing, it's got amazing world building and history. It's just very, very heavy. In sort of a line with that, the next book I read was How Long Till Black Future Month by N.K. Jemisin. This is a book of short stories, all written by N.K. Jemisin in various points of her life. She has a preface that sort of explains how she got into short story writing versus novel writing, because previously she's only really published her novels. I am kind of ambivalent on short story collections in general, usually, but I really liked this one. I loved a couple of them and really enjoyed the rest of them. I thought they're very imaginative. The one thing I would say is that don't necessarily do this one on audiobook, because that is how I did it, and unfortunately the quality of the audiobook narrators varies a lot because there's a different narrator for each story. Well, I'd say there's maybe 6 narrators and they kind of trade off. And some of them are great, and some of them kind of read English as if they've never spoken English before. So definitely check out the collection. I don't want to put you off of the book, just maybe don't check out the audiobook. Do it on physical or ebook copy. Okay, so now getting into more of the history side of Black History Month. One of the books that I read was The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. If you didn't know that Alexandre Dumas is Black, he is. His father was the son of a white French nobleman and a Black slave woman. And his father actually was the inspiration for a lot of Alexandre Dumas' characters. He was a military man who was imprisoned for years, so he's kind of both the inspiration for Count of Monte Cristo and for The Three Musketeers, which is this one. This was a reread for me. I really enjoy this book. It is one of those that's a bunch of friends failing upwards. They're all complete disasters, but it somehow works out for them. The Three Musketeers is kind of Dumas' historical fanfiction. It takes some liberties with historical events and actual historical people, like the King and Queen of France at the time, the Duke of Buckingham in England, who was kind of having a love affair with the Queen. Maybe in Three Musketeers it's yes, but in reality maybe. Anyway, like I said, there are some liberties taken. Since it is written in French, there are a few different translations. I don't know that I can recommend a specific translation because I don't remember which one or ones I've read, but I did it on audiobook, narrated by Simon Vance, who also does the Temeraire novels. He's a delightful reader, and the book is a delightful time. Can I use delightful once more? Okay, getting into some real history rather than historical fan fiction, I also read Barracoon, The Story of the Last Black Cargo. This is by Zora Neale Hurston, but was only published, I think, within the last couple years. So it was published posthumously. Zora Neale Hurston was never able to get this book published in her lifetime because it was an interview with the last known slave to be transported from Africa to the Americas. And she wrote her interviews with him all in his original dialect, which all publishers wanted her to change, and she refused to do. So that is why it has only recently been published. It's a pretty short book, and it starts with an introduction that is really about the history of the publication and a sort of history of Zora Neale Hurston at the time that she was doing these interviews. I don't know how I felt about it being before the book. I kind of feel like maybe it should be listened to after the book. So if you're going to do it, maybe consider skipping the introduction and coming back to it later. This one is also read by Robin Miles in the audiobook version, and I do recommend doing this one in audiobook version if you are not familiar with African dialect, or even if you are, but if it's just not something you speak normally, I would recommend doing this on audiobook because it's really going to give you that full, rich sense of him telling his story the way that he would have actually told it. And so he tells the story of how he was captured, his people were slaughtered in a raid by a rival tribe, and he was taken to the coast, stuck in cages, and then transported, you know, across the ocean into the Americas. And he was only a slave for, I think it was less than 10 years before he was freed. And so the interviews were, I think, taking place in like the 1930s or so. But, you know, he was going to be married before he was captured. He did end up getting married in the US, but by the time she's interviewing him, basically he is the last one of his immediate family. Most of his family has died. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is that it doesn't just tell his story, it also tells a little bit of the story of what it was like interviewing him and how there would be periods where he would get like transported off into memories and be stuck in these memories of long ago atrocities, and he wouldn't be able to talk anymore for the day. So I found this book really moving. It's a piece of history that I had learned about but didn't really get a good sense of what it would have been like to live it, and so I think that's one thing that this book does really well. On a sort of similar note, in that it deals very much with slavery and the slave trade, I also recently read Homegoing by Ya Gyasi, I think. This is a book written by a woman who immigrated from Ghana, and it tells a story starting in the 1700s of these two women that are half-sisters that never meet. They are both African women in Ghana, and one of them is married to a white slave trader who is trading out of, what was it called? Cape Coast Castle, I think. And then the other one is captured in a raid by other African people and is sold into slavery. And it then traces their genealogy, I guess, through the next like 7 generations. So each chapter is from the point of view of a different person. We only get 1 chapter per person. So it starts with the 2 sisters, and then the next 2 chapters are 1 each of their children, and then the next 2 chapters are 1 each of their grandchildren, and so on through the next 7 generations. And it was absolutely fascinating. There is so much history lost, honestly, on both sides. Like, you see it happen very, very quickly in the side where the woman who gets sold into slavery, but we see it happen in the other lineage too, how much history gets lost and how much family history gets lost and how difficult it is to know who you are when you don't know where you come from. I would say that maybe some chapters are a little stronger than others, some stories are a little stronger than others, because it does follow like the successive 7 generations, and we see pretty much how each of those successive generation comes about. It does focus a lot on love and marriage and sex. There is a threat of sexual violence kind of hovering around the like edges of the narrative. It does occur on screen at least once, I think only once, but I can't swear to that. I thought that the chapters that took place in Ghana were particularly interesting and illuminating for me because I didn't really know a whole lot about the history of the tribes in Ghana and the ways that they interacted with each other and the ways that some of them worked with the white people. I didn't really know a whole lot about that. Like, I knew that it happened, but I didn't really know any kind of details. And so that was really, really interesting to me, and especially seeing how that legacy of selling other Africans to white men kind of, at some point it made that line feel like their line was poisoned and that there was evil in it, and I think that that was really fascinating, that whole discussion. So this is a work of fiction, but it felt so real and so important that it was my first 5-star book rating of the year. I borrowed it from the library, but I'm gonna have to go get a physical copy of it to keep because it's that good. And the last one I have to talk about, I should have maybe included earlier because it's another Afrofuturist one. It is Binti Home by Nnedi Okorafor. These ones, the audiobooks, are also narrated by Robin Miles. You're kind of maybe sensing a pattern. I did this one on ebook, but I've done the other one, the first one, on audiobook, and I'm doing the third one right now on audiobook. This is book 2 in a trilogy of novellas. She is the first woman of her tribe, I think it is the Himba tribe, to attend this university out in space. And while she's in the spaceship traveling to the university, her entire class and basically everyone else on the ship is killed by an alien invasion. She is the only one left alive through reasons that, you know, become important later. So book 2 is after she's arrived at the university and her having to come back to Earth, and then book 3 is I just started it, but it's continuing on with her back on Earth and trying to reconcile her experiences at the university on the spaceship with you know, her very traditional family and their beliefs that she's starting to realize she maybe doesn't totally agree with. It's a super different style of science fiction than really anything I've read before. She keeps referring to this ability that she has called treeing, which is basically like going off into these like mathematical trances, almost like she's doing meditating that also involves these like constantly branching mathematical equations. It's very interesting, and I don't totally understand where the series is going yet, but once I finish the 3rd book, I will let you know how I feel about it. So that is going to be everything for my Black History Month readings / recommendations for next Black History Month reading. If you are thinking about that already, you probably aren't. But you can also read any of these anytime. It doesn't have to be during February. So let me know some works by Black authors that you've been loving lately down in the comments, and I will see you guys soon with another video. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye! I did my makeup very pink today in honor of my recently back on my bullshit pink hair. You know, I got rid of the fantasy hair. I cut off the mermaid hair back like over a year ago, and I decided, you know what, it's time to get back to it. I miss my fantasy hair, so here we are. Oh, if you're wondering about the posters behind me, they say various book-related things, including when in doubt, go to the library. I also have my Hedwig pillow here, and then I also have my not fandom or book-related, but extremely soft and squishy sloth pillow. It's raining. I want comfortable things. Okay, bye.